right, so we're starting a brand new series, and the series is called Stand. Everybody say stand. Oh, try it again. Everybody say stand. Stand. There we go. All right, so we're talking about Daniel. We're gonna take a look at a man named Daniel in a book called Daniel. Okay, I think it's kind of weird. The dude, like, if you write your story about your own life and you just call it like by that, it would be like if I wrote a book and like the title of my book is Kendall. Like what? Like he just wrote it about himself. That's all right. That's fine. But here's the deal. We're going to look at the book of the Bible called Daniel, and we're going to look at the life of a man named Daniel. And over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to look at how to stand out, stand up, and stand firm. All right. So tonight the title is all about stand out. So the title is called Stand Out. So tonight we're going to look at stand out. Next week we're going to look at how to stand up. Okay. So but the main thought for today, and we're going to like see this key thought throughout tonight. So maybe if you're a note taker, write this down. If you're not a note taker, I want to encourage you to become a note taker. People who take notes are the people who change the world. I really do believe that. Okay. So write down some notes. I'm always taking notes in my phone, and that's why I always have something just kind of brewing. So this is the main thought, and we'll see it all throughout the night, is this. I'd rather be remembered for standing out than forgotten for blending in. All right? Everybody wants to fit in. Nobody wants to be weird, right? Nobody wants to be like a complete standout. You want to fit in. You want to like go with the flow. You want to like whatever the trend is, man. I want to be like in with that trend, okay? Like I want that. But I would rather not blend in, okay? I would rather be remembered for standing out than forgotten for blending in. Because if everything of your life is all about blending in, you're not gonna stand out, and you will be forgotten at the end of your life. So how do we stand out? In the right ways, at the right time, for the right reason. Okay? There's keys there. It's not just standing out for the sake of standing out. Don't be weird for the sake of being weird. Don't be different just to try to be different. Nobody likes that when people are just like trying really hard to be different just for the sake of difference. Like, that's just strange. Like, stop doing that, okay? But stand out in the right ways, at the right time, for the right reason. Because I believe with all my heart that this could have an impact on your life, because when we do stand out in the right ways, at the right time, for the right reason, it can change the course and the direction of our lives. Okay? But the flip side of this is true. When you compromise and you're not standing out, right? When you compromise on the wrong things, in the wrong ways, at the wrong times, it can cost us more than we can even imagine. So, over the next couple weeks, like I said, we're going to look at how do we take a stand for the things that matter most. In the right ways, the right time, the right reasons, okay? How do we take a stand for the things that matter most? So tonight, we're going to look at how to stand out. We're going to start with Daniel chapter 1, and I'm going to give you a little bit of like backstory behind the story. I'm going to give you the summary, and then we're going to read it, okay? So the backstory is this. King Nebuchadnezzar was the king at that time. That's a super weird name. I don't like it, but that was his name, okay? So King Nebuchadnezzar. He's a king, but he's an evil king. Like, he's not a good dude. He destroyed Jerusalem. He took them captive, right? And this guy, he's so evil, he didn't just destroy the city. He's like, I'm going to destroy the temple. And not just did he destroy the temple because it represented them worshiping God. He's like, no, I'm going to like defile it, okay? So he goes into the temple, and he takes every bit of everything that's inside the temple that represents the way that they worship God, and he destroys it. He burns it, and then he destroys it in front of people so they can see it, and then he burns the temple so they can see, all in this thing of like in your face, like, no, you will not worship God, the one that you say is the one true God. As if to say, I'm taking out anything that remotely matters to you that is close to the worship of the one that you say is the one true God, okay? So not only did he do this, did he destroy the temple, all the religious symbols, but to make it worse, he said essentially, I'm going to destroy your future as well as your present. A lot of people, what they want to do is they want to destroy your present, right? They want to get you like right now, right here in this moment. But he thought ahead. King Nebuchadnezzar was so evil, he thought ahead, and he's like, how can I mess them up? How can I hurt them 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now? What can I do? He's like, I know, I can take the people that are young, like the best and the brightest that they have in their nation. I'm going to take them, and now they have no future. They have no like, oh, this is the bright, like future stars of our, like, no. He's like, now they're on my team. Now they're on my side. And that's what he did. He said to his leaders, go find the sharpest, the brightest sons of the royalty and the nobles. And he said, I basically want you to kidnap them. take them, bring them to me. He said, I'm going to indoctrinate them into the Babylonian way, the Babylonian culture. And he's going to train them for 3 years. He said, I'm going to take these young men, I'm going to train them for 3 years, and then they're going to become my leaders. They will no longer be the leaders for Israel, for God's people. Okay, so not only am I destroying Jerusalem, your present, I'm destroying your future by taking your best and your brightest and making them my leaders so they won't be yours. Okay? So that's the backstory. We'll go to the story now. We'll look at Daniel chapter 1, and we'll kind of re-explain some of what I just did and give you a little bit more detail. So Daniel chapter 1, starting in verse 3, here's what happened. It says, the king ordered Ashpenaz, his friends call him Ash, I'm assuming, or I'm just hoping, because that's super weird, okay? I would hate to go through like 5th grade with the name Ashpenaz, okay? So we're just going to call him Ash. The king ordered Ash, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. In other words, what the king said to his leaders, he said, what I want you to do is go and find the guys who are voted most likely to succeed. Go find the guys that are good looking. Go find the guys that are ripped, the guys that are athletic. Find the guys who are really smart. Get the valedictorians and get the star basketball players and get them all and bring them all in here. Like if they're dummies, just leave them. If they're smart, bring them in. If they're like completely unathletic and they can't even like walk and chew gum, like leave them alone. I don't want those guys. But the athletes, that's who I want. And he brings them in, right? Those are the guys. And he says this. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. In other words, he's saying, I want them to speak like we speak. I want them to think the way that we think. It says, the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. All right, now this is important. We're going to come back to this. Okay, we're going to come back and look at the king's table. He said, I want them to eat from the king's table. Then he said, they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. All right? So he's like, bring those guys. We're going to train them up for 3 years. That's all they're going to do every single day, day in, day out. If you play football, you know what it's like to have like 2-a-days. They're having 2-a-days every single day for 3 years because they are training. They are working really, really hard, okay? And here's what I want you to notice. The king wanted them to think like the Babylonians think, behave like the Babylonians behaved, and believe what the Babylonians believe. This is important because I want you to know that this is what the devil wants to do to you. This is what the devil wants to do to me. What the devil wants to do is he wants to take Christians and cause us to think the way that he thinks, to believe the way that he thinks, to behave the way that the world behaves and no longer be separate and stand out as Christians, but he wants us to just blend in with the culture of the day and not be separate. But God calls us to live completely separate lives. But Satan wants us to lower our standard, to start to think like the rest of the world, to start to talk like the rest of the world, to start to act like the rest of the world. And that's why I would argue with all of my heart that it's completely impossible to be sort of a Christian and make it through this life spiritually. You can't be sort of a Christian. You're like, what do you mean by sort of a Christian? What is sort of a Christian? Well, they're everywhere. There's sort of a Christians in this room. There's quite a few sort of Christians in this room, to be honest with you. There are sort of Christians in your school. There might be sort of Christians in your home. There are sort of Christians that I see everywhere that I go. And what are sort of Christians? Sort of Christians are people who say, like, if you ask him, hey, do you believe in God? They're like, yeah, I sure do. I believe in God. I believe he's real. Yeah. Yeah, so that means I'm a Christian. You say, well, what else makes you a Christian? You're like, are you a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian for sure. I mean, I'm not atheist, right? I'm not Buddhist. Like, I'm a Christian. Yeah, for sure. Okay? And I go to church. Of course I'm a Christian. I go to church. And my family, we go to church. My family is Christians. We are Christians. You know, that doesn't work. It doesn't matter if your family is serving Jesus. It's about you. You at some point need to become personally responsible for your faith. And so I would ask you this. Are you a Christian? Those things don't matter. I would ask you this. Is there an outward sign of your faith? Is there an outward sign? If you're taking notes, write that down. Is there an outward sign of my faith? Can somebody tell that I'm a Christian by the way that I act, by the way that I talk, by the way that I live my life. Can anybody else tell, or are you just like the same as everybody else in the world, but you go to church sometimes, or you go to youth group on Wednesday nights, but everything else about you is exactly the same? That doesn't make you a Christian. You got to stand out. You have to be different. That's what Jesus calls us to live like, all right? You got to be different from the rest of the world, standing out. It would be like saying, like, you know what, can you work out? Can you go to the gym, work out, and lift weights one time a year and expect for anything to happen? No. Can you do it once a month even? Really? No, probably not, okay? It's not going to make a difference, okay? And just like I'm married, I can't go to my wife like once a year, every Valentine's Day, be like, hey, baby, I love you. And that's the only time that I say I love you, because it's Valentine's Day. And for her to expect that I love her, for me to expect that she knows that I love her, just because I said it once a year, right? Expect her to really believe that? It doesn't work that way. Just like you can't just go to church once a week, and that's the only time that you spend with God. That's the only time that you're different from the rest of the world and expect to be growing and thriving spiritually. You've got to make the presence of God a priority in your life, where you seek Him, where you depend on Him, where you're living, you're dwelling in His Word, where it's feeding you, and we're going to get to that in a minute. It's feeding you. It's renewing your mind. You're learning to walk by faith, not by sight. You're hearing God's Spirit guide you. You can't just be sort of, kind of a Christian and have the life and victory that God wants you to have. See, sometimes you have to take a stand for that which matters most. Remember, in the right way, at the right time, for the right reasons. Why? Because I'd rather be remembered for standing out than forgotten for blending in. I'd rather be remembered for standing out than forgotten for blending in. And if you're never standing out, you're always blending in, then you're not truly committed to following Jesus. Because when you follow Jesus, you will be different than the rest of the world. If you're not different, that's just a little clue that you're not really, truly following Jesus. You're not set apart. You're not standing out. And that's where we'll go to see what happens in the life of Daniel. We're going to look at verses 6 and 7. All right? Continuing the story. As the story goes on, it says, among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, most of you guys probably know who these guys are, but maybe you didn't know what their original names were, okay? We're going to watch. They changed two things. They're going to change their diet, and they're going to change their name. And those two things are important, but we'll see why, okay? Change the diet, change the names. The chief official gave them new names. It says, to Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. I'm glad that's not my name, Belteshazzar, all right? To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. All right? So you guys have heard of like the three guys in the fire, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, right? You have heard these names, but their original names were not those. That's what they were changed to. Now, why did they change their names? Let's get a little context of why they changed their names. How old were these boys? Most biblical scholars would say that these guys right here in this story were somewhere between the ages of 12 and 15. These weren't 35 and 40-year-old men. These were 12 to 15-year-old guys, all right? Raise your hand if you are between the ages of 12 and 15, all right? That's a bunch of you, okay? So you can put your hands down. That's a lot of you. That's how old these guys were, 12 to 15 years old. So we're talking junior high or freshmen, maybe even sophomores in high school. Their identity is taken away. They're taken away from their families, ripped out of their homes. They're 1,000 miles away from home. The first thing the king wants to do to them is change their name, where they no longer even get to be called what they were originally called. Why? Because their original names were tied to the worship of the one true God, meaning their names given by their parents were like an act of worshiping and serving God. They were declaring over the lives that they would serve God. But all their new names were tied to the worship of false gods. Their new names were tied to like pagan idol worship. And so essentially every time, if that was you, every time someone calls you by your name, there's a reminder, hey, you're supposed to serve this other God. Every time that you're called by your new name, it's like, no, you're not that. You don't serve God. You serve these idols. You're a pagan worshiper. That's what we call you day in, day out, every single day. Every time somebody says your name, oh yeah, you don't serve God anymore. You have a new identity. That's what they were trying to speak over them. They changed their name, but check out what else they did. They're going to change their diet. You're supposed to eat, like we read earlier, the food that's prepared for the king, the royal food. I think I got some royal food. I got some guys that can help me. They're going to bring out the king's food, or to me, kind of what represents the king's food today. And I don't know about you, but king's food, royal food, that sounds good to me. Oh man, red velvet is good. Do you know, y'all know about red velvet? I don't know what it's made out of, but it's delicious, all right? Hey, let's just turn, yeah, perfect. Thank you. Oh, yes, okay. So we got our spread here. This is the king's food. This is the royal food. Oh my goodness, this looks good. I'm gonna just get some royal icing right now. That's better than I actually thought. I'm gonna get more. That's way better than I thought it was gonna be. I don't like cupcakes, but that's really good. Okay, I'm gonna eat that later. So check this out. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking, this looks good, okay? This is really good. I love me some sandwiches on a croissant. I love some cupcakes. I want what the king's gonna eat, right? Even if it's not that, I'm thinking the king's food, what's that gonna be? That's gonna be the best of the best. That's gonna be some filet mignon. Oh my goodness, I love that. It's Ruth's Chris. The king's food is some Ruth's Chris. The king's food is the good stuff, all right? The problem was, the food that was prepared for the king was the food that was dedicated to pagan gods. It was dedicated to idol worship. It was offered to idols first, and then it was brought in to the king's court, okay? So this created a real problem for Daniel and his friends because they wanted to worship God, the one true God, in every way possible, and to eat or drink anything, no matter how good it would taste, to eat or drink anything that was offered to pagan gods, to idols, they knew that would cross a line and that would be disrespectful to God. And so they knew this was the moment that they needed to stand out. This is the moment that they needed to be different because everybody else is eating this and it was so good, but they knew that they couldn't do it because it would be dishonoring to the God that they served. So verse 8 is probably the key verse of everything we're going to look at in the story. Verse 8 says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way." Notice that, okay? He didn't fight back when his name was taken. He said, all right, that's fine. You can call me whatever you want. I'm guessing, why did he do that? Why didn't he fight back with that? Why did he fight back with the food but not the name? I think this. I'm thinking he's thinking, you know what? You can call me whatever you want. You can call me whatever you like. I know who I am. I know who I serve. I know who God has called me and created me to be. I'm confident in who I am. So you can say whatever you want about me. You can call me whatever you want, but I know I'm confident in who I am and whose I am, right? And I'm going to stop right there. This is not in my notes. This is not planned, but I want to stop right there, and I want somebody to know. I think this is for somebody in here in this room today. That you know what? You got to know who you are and who you belong to, that you belong to God, that you are His. You got to know who you are called and created to be. And they can say whatever they want about you. Other people can put whatever labels they want on you, but you got to know you're not that. You're not what they say you are. You're not who they say you are. You are a child of the King, and you got to know it, and you got to own it, all right? I'm going to move on. That was for free, all right? But see this. This is what he said. An outward name does not define who I am in my heart, but I will not feed myself with evil things. I want you to write that down. I will not feed myself with evil things. You need to declare that over your life. I will not feed myself with evil things. I will not, no matter how enticing it is, I will not let evil come into my heart. I will not let evil come into my mind. I love this. He made a predetermined resolution. Before the temptation was even there, before the cupcakes showed up, before the steak showed up, before the sandwiches showed up, before the drinks were there, he said, before I even get into the king's court, I'm going to say, I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to eat it because it's going to cross a line. He predetermined what he was going to do. He pre-decided, right? You decide in the moment, but Daniel said, no, I pre-decided. Is that a word? It is now, all right? He pre-decided. You got to pre-decide what you will do, and that's why he was successful spiritually, all right? See, had he not pre-decided, then when the food comes in front of him and then he makes the decision, he's going to eat that. Okay? If you don't determine ahead of time the decisions that you will make, the things that you will stand for, the morals that you will not compromise on, you got to pre-decide those. You got to make up your mind before the temptation comes so that when the temptation comes, you say, no, no, no. I won't feed myself with evil things. I will not let evil things come into my life. All right? It would have been easy for him to look at this and be like, man, that looks really good. And everybody else is eating it. Even the other people that were the Jewish people, they're eating it, and it doesn't look like God's striking us down for it, so it's not that big a deal. Maybe I'll just eat it just this one time, and then I'll figure out something else next time. No. He did it. It would have been a lot easier for him to do, but he predetermined. He resolved ahead of time before he was faced with the temptation. So I would argue all day long this. Get this truth. Your life will be determined by what you decide ahead of time, all right? Your life will be determined by what you decide ahead of time. Not in the moment. Man, will I, won't I? No. You got to decide ahead of time what you will do, how you will stand out, what you will stand up for, the morals that you will not compromise, all right? I've pre-decided to honor God in every way. Okay, so what is that for me? Some things that I've decided, no, I'm not going to touch that. Even though other people are, even though it looks good, I'm not going to do it. One of those things that I've decided in my life, and I'm not saying everybody has to do this. I'm just saying this is me, a ground that I said, nope, this is it for me, is movies, all right? I know me, and I know my limits, and I know my mind, and I know my eyes, and I know my heart. And so I decided a long time ago, and actually me and my wife, Allison, we stand by this moral. We say no R-rated movies. We don't watch R-rated movies in our house. We don't go to R-rated movies, all right? So we're scrolling through movies. You know how it is. Like, hey, let's see what there is to watch. And we're scrolling, hey, this looks good, rated R. Sorry, boom, we move on. We don't debate, like, well, should we? Is it really that bad? Let's look up. Let's see how many F words are in it. Like, how much nudity is really in the movie. Let's just see. No, I'm not going to let that into my heart. I'm not going to let that into my mind. So we just say, no, we already determined. We don't watch R-rated movies. You say, like, Pastor Kendall, that's a little extreme. Like, are you kidding? You're a full-grown adult. You're 35 years old and you watch. No. I don't watch R-rated movies. I don't. Why? Because I determined a long time ago that I will not let evil into my home. I will not watch it with my eyes, okay? This is another thing that I used to do. Now I have, like, when I go to the movies, I know I have Allison next to me, like, as accountability. And really, I look up stuff nowadays. But back then, I didn't know, like, these tools on the internet, the apps to look up, like, okay, what is exactly in this movie? So sometimes not even an R-rated movie. It'd be a PG-13 movie. And you know sometimes a PG-13 movie has a scene, and you know what I mean by scene. There's a scene, you're like, whoa, what is going on? Why are there strippers everywhere? Like, it's crazy, right? You know the kind of movie I'm talking about. You know the kind of scene I'm talking about. All right? And so what I would do is I would always eat gummy bears in the movies. That was my jam. That was my thing. I would always bring gummy bears to the movies. So when one of those scenes comes up, I knew, I pre-decided ahead of time. I'm not going to look at evil things. I know my mind. I'm not going to let temptation enter into my mind. And so when I'm watching the movie, and when the scene's coming up, okay, here's the guys, and they're just like, why are they walking into a strip club? I wonder what's going to come up on the screen. You know what's going to come up on the screen. Don't look. So what I would do is I'd start looking at the gummy bears, and what I would do is I would try to find all the red gummy bears in my bag, okay? So what I'm doing, as soon as that scene comes up, I'm not looking there. I'm like, boom, I am focused. I'm like, red gummy bear. Is that red or is that orange? Like, okay, there's the red one. There's another one. There's yellow. That goes over here. The green goes. And I'm like focused, laser focused on the red gummy bears because I'm looking down because I will not look up. Why? Because I will not feed my life with evil things. I won't feed myself with evil things. It looks enticing. It looks good. Everybody else is watching. It's not that big a deal. No, I will not. Why? Because I predetermined, I pre-decided. That's why I brought the gummy bears, because I was ready. All that to be said, every now and then, because of what you predetermined in your heart to do to honor your God, you'll have to stand out. You'll be a little weird. Some of you are looking at me like, you're weird. That's so weird. Why do you do that? That's fine. You can look at me and say, you're weird. That's okay for me to stand out. I'm fine with that. I will decide in my heart ahead of time to honor my God. I'll stand out. Because if you're never standing out and you're always blending in, then you are not fully following Christ. Remember that. If you're never standing out, you're always blending in, you're not really truly following Christ. And that's what Daniel and these boys did. They said, I've resolved in my heart not to eat this food that's been offered to pagan gods. And what that sounds like when you first read it, it sounds like a one-time event. Read this one little verse and say, oh, they resisted temptation like right there in that moment. No, think about it. It was for 3 years, consistently. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Next day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Next day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. They did not eat the king's food over and over and over. And if you're fully following Christ, you're going to find the closer you get to him, the more often you're going to stand out. Why? Because I'd rather be remembered for standing out than be forgotten for blending in. So you watch the wisdom of Daniel in verses 12 through 15. Go back to the story. Daniel says this to the government leader who's above him. He says, hey, here's the deal. I don't want to eat this food, all right? We're not going to eat it, but here's what I'm going to say. He said, well, read this. It says, test us for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. That sounds terrible, all right? In other words, I'm not eating this good stuff, the royal food, the king's food. Give me some celery and some water. That sounds awful, but that's what they did. He said, give us water and vegetables. In verse 13, he said, then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So the king agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. Everybody say 10 days. Just so I know you're with me, say it again. Everybody say 10 days. 10 days. Check this out. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So in other words, Daniel said, hey, you eat the meat, you eat the sweets, you just go for it. Like eat all of the king's food, all of the royal food, go for it. But what I'm going to do is me and my boys, what we're going to do is we're just going to eat vegetables and we're going to drink water. And God is going to honor that. Supernaturally, God will honor that. Does it make sense to like be strong at the end of it? No, but you know what? We will be. So you eat that, we'll eat this, and we'll test each other. So basically what he's saying is like, hey, we're going to, while we're eating our celery and you eat all your like good stuff, the royal food, we're all going to work out while we're doing it. And at the end of 10 days, we're all going to send each other our like post-workout gym selfies, okay? So after we work out, we're going to send each other our post-workout gym selfies. And Daniel and his gym bros had way better looking gym selfies than the other guys that ate all the food that was great and full of the protein and full of the carbs. And they had all of it. But you know what? God gave the other guys favor. Why? Because they chose to honor him. They chose to stand out. See, man, I've always tried. I say tried. I haven't always been perfect, but I've always given it everything that I have, right? To try my best to stand out, to honor God. So I'm gonna wrap up with just a couple of things at the end. So if I could get some music behind me, that would be good, because that gives me the reminder to stop talking. All right. So I know that like it's small things. Sometimes it's the really small things. When I was in high school, I remember there was this one day that like the last period, the last class, there was like this murmur going on, hey, did you hear about the fight that's going to happen? Well, I'm like, oh, what fight? Oh, yeah, these two guys are going to fight after school, but it's not going to be at school because it's going to be like a for real fight, okay? We don't want anybody breaking this thing up at school. So what we're going to do, everybody's going to watch the fight, and it's going down at the park, okay? The park by the lake. And the park, okay, if you're from where I was from, the park by the lake is like, that's where stuff goes down. I don't know why, but that's where stuff always went down. So yes, the park by the lake, everybody's going to go like, oh, okay, cool. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go to this fight because I love watching a fight. Man, isn't it just fun to watch a fight? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch a fight. It's going to be awesome. But then I'm like, wait a minute. I know the kind of stuff that happens at the park, at the lake. It's not just going to be like one small thing. It's going to be a big thing. There's going to be a lot of illegal activity that will be happening at the park by the lake, because that's what happens at these things. And I knew it. And I wanted to go because my friends were all going. And some of my friends were even involved in the fight. I was like, ooh, maybe I should have their back. Maybe I should just watch. Maybe I don't know. But I'm watching. I'm like, no. I'm not going to do it. Why? Because I have predetermined in my heart, I will not feed myself with evil things. I will not participate. I will not put myself in an environment of temptation, because I know there's going to be all kinds of stuff happening at the park by the lake. So I will not go there. Why? Because I predetermined. I predecided. I will stand out. I'll be different. And there was so much. Did I catch a lot of flack for that? What do you mean you're not going? It's going to be fun. It's fine, but I'm not going to go. There's another situation with me in my life that continues to this day is I decided a long, long time ago that I'm not going to drink. I don't drink alcohol. I don't. Am I over 21? For sure. It's illegal. Yeah, for sure. Do I do it? No, not at all, ever. What do you mean never? No, not ever, ever. Not even a little bit, not even in whatever situation. No, I don't do it, okay? I just don't. That's something that I predetermined in my heart a long time ago. I will not, because it's too much of a temptation. There are too many bad things. I've seen it ruin too many people's lives. I've seen too many people make bad choices under that influence. And so I said, no, I will not, ever. Now, have there been a lot of times where it's been tempting? Absolutely. Have there been a lot of times where it's been like, hey, and it's been offered to me, handed over to me, and I say, no, I'm not going to do it. Why? Because I already determined in my heart, I will not. Do I stand out? Do I feel a little bit weird? Do I have to explain myself sometimes? Yeah. Even to Christians? Yeah. But it's something that I have determined in my heart to do. See, all of you, you've got these opportunities in your life. Pre-decide what morals are you going to stand on. What are the things that you're going to say, no, that's me, that's what I'm going to stand. That's where I'm going to make a stand. I'm not going to eat the king's food. It's difficult to stand out. In verse 19, check it out. We see this. It says, the king talked with them. I love this. It says, he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. See, God gave them favor. There was nobody equal to them. Guess what? Because they stood out, if that makes sense. Because they took a stand, they stood out above the rest. And everybody started to notice, wait, they did better in school. Man, they're better athletes. Man, these guys are just doing better in life than everybody else. God gave them favor. These boys did better in school, right? So, lesson, you want to do better in school? If the cafeteria food's offered to idols, don't eat it. I'm just kidding. That's probably not the situation. But really, though, think about it. They had favor. Some of y'all are like, I bet that's what's wrong with my cafeteria, because they're probably not offering it to idols. Think about this, though. They really had favor. They really were smarter. They really were stronger. They were more talented. They had more opportunities. I don't know about you, but with all of my heart, I would rather be remembered for standing out than forgotten for blending in. If you're always blending in, then you're not fully committed to following Christ. See, you're going to stand out when you resist the royal food. What I mean by that is I don't mean physically. I want you to ask yourself the question, what are you feeding yourself with? If you're taking notes, write that down. What am I feeding myself with? How am I feeding myself? What am I letting into my heart? What am I letting into my mind? What am I looking at? What am I listening to? In other words, what I'm asking is, what are you consuming? What are you letting in? There's a lot that happens, I would say, the king's food, a lot that culture just lets in on these little bad boys right here, right? There's a whole lot on there that you can go, oh man, everybody else is just looking at that. No, maybe it's what you're letting in to your eyes when you look at that app or that website, when you think nobody else is around. Maybe it's the conversations that you allow yourself to participate in. Maybe you're texting this and that. Maybe you're listening to those messages. You're reading that. You're like, yeah, you're participating in that conversation. Maybe it's the gossip. Maybe it's the negativity. Maybe it's not on here. Maybe it's physically. It's the conversations that you allow yourself to be in, to participate in. Maybe it's the jokes that you allow yourself to participate in, and laugh at and condone and even tell. Maybe it's the music that you listen to, again, a lot of times on here. It's the music that you're listening to. You're letting it into your mind. It's the stuff that you're watching, the movies, the TV shows that you are watching. You're letting this into your mind. What are you feeding yourself with? You're going to stand out. You're going to look different because it looks enticing. It's good. There are well-made movies out there that you shouldn't watch. There's greatly awesome sounding, well-produced music that you should not listen to if you're going to honor God. There are a lot of things there are conversations that are so enticing, but you should not be a part of them. If you are going to honor your God, you're going to stand out. You're going to be different. See, so much of the royal fruit of the day is something that our culture is just consuming every single day. But feed yourself with the good things. Remember, they didn't starve themselves. They still fed themselves. What did they feed themselves with? Stuff that was good, stuff that was building them up. That's what you should be feeding yourself with. Are you feeding yourself daily with the Word? Are you feeding yourself daily with time in God's presence, spending time in prayer, spending real time in His presence? Are you feeding yourself with godly friendships, like conversations that encourage you, that build you up, that build your faith, people who will pull you along, people who will be a positive influence you? Maybe it's your thoughts. You can control your thoughts. You know that, right? You're in control of your own thoughts. Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And this is what you should think about. Control your thoughts. This is what you should let into your mind. This is what you should let into your heart. This is what you should let into your ears. And you're going to stand out. You're going to be different. You're going to look different when you do this. I'm going to tell you this one last story. This is a true story. A lot of you may have heard this name before, Joan of Arc. This lady, or rather girl really, Joan of Arc. She was a teenager, but she was, even as a teenage girl, she was a leader in her country's military. And she kept having dreams during battle times, dreams from God. And the only reason that the French leadership in the military began to listen to her at all was because they were losing in battle badly. And then Joan of Arc began to prove to them that she knew things that nobody else knew. She knew where the enemy was going to be. She knew their plan. She knew what strategies they should do. She knew things that nobody else should know because God was speaking to her in her dreams. And so they started to follow her. They started to listen to her. And history tells us that at one point, this military and her troops, they came to this massive wall. The enemy had this wall, and the enemy was waiting just on the other side of the wall, and they were kind of at a standstill. Joan of Arc was pleading with her military leaders, saying, we've got to go, we've got to charge. We will be successful if we climb over this wall. But they said, no way. It's a death sentence for the first people over the wall because they're waiting. Those first few people over the wall are for sure going to die. So they're like, we're not going. So for 48 hours, they camped out on this side of the wall, not being brave enough to scale the wall and go over. But for 48 hours, the whole time, Joan of Arc kept saying, no, we've got to go. We've got to charge. We will succeed. We will conquer them if we go. And they said, no, we will not go. And finally, Joan of Arc came to her leaders. Enough was enough, she decided. Finally, she looked at one of her generals, and she said, I'll be the first one. She said, I will lead the men over the wall. When she said this, her general looked her right in the eye, and he said, there won't be one man behind you if you do that. And she's still full of courage, still full of determination. When he said, there won't even be one man behind you, she said, well, I won't be looking back to see. She's like, I'm going to go. Even if I'm the only one, I'm going to go. I'm not going to look back and see if anybody's following me. I'm not going to look around and say, okay, are you ready? Are you ready? Are we going? No, she said, I'm going even if nobody else does. And that's the thing. Spiritually, we need to have that same heart that says, you know what? Everybody else lives one way, but I will go this way. I will live a completely different life. I will watch out. I will not feed myself with evil things, even if I'm the only one. I won't even be looking back to see who's following me. I won't even be looking around to see who's with me. Even if I'm the only one, I choose Jesus. I will follow Jesus with my whole heart. I will be committed. So what I want to ask you to do is to have some bravery. Normally I like to do this, hey, if nobody looking around, but this time I want everybody looking. I want everybody looking just up this way, not all around. Everybody up here, focus. If you're here and you say, you know what? I'm going to make a commitment right here, right now, to make a stand for my God. That I will stand out. I'll be different. I don't care. I'm gonna stand. I will not feed myself with evil things, even if everybody else does. I will be different than the rest of the world. I will follow Jesus, and I will make that commitment to not compromise my morals. And when I do, I'm gonna make a difference in this world. If you're gonna make a commitment to do that, I want to be like I'm already standing. But if I wasn't, I'd be the first one to stand. I want to see, man, will you stand with me? Will you say, man, I'm gonna be that. I'm gonna be a light. I'm gonna stand out. I will refuse what the rest of the world says yes for. If that's you, just stand up right where you're at. Go ahead and stand. Stand up. If you say, man, that's me, I'm gonna commit. I'll commit. It's not easy, but I'm gonna do it. Let's go. Here's what I think. If you're for real, if you stood up and you're actually for real and you say, you know what, I'm gonna do it. When nobody else is following Jesus, I will. When everybody else is just going for what's easy, what looks good, and what's convenient, and what's the immediate gratification right now, and I'm gonna stand out, I'm gonna be different. If you're serious and you follow through on that, we've got a room of world changers. This room can literally change the world if you follow through on that. So man, let's hold each other accountable. Let's do this. Let's do this together. I'm going to pray over you. God, I thank you so much for our youth family. God, I thank you for those that are willing to say, I will stand out. I will be different. I'm not going to go along with the standards of the rest of the world, but I'm going to hold myself to a higher standard. I will honor God even if nobody else is and nobody else is willing to. I won't be looking back to see who's with me. But God, I will stand out. I will not feed myself with evil things. I will guard my eyes. I will guard my mind. I will guard my ears. I will guard my heart. God, I will hold myself to a higher standard. God, I pray that you would speak to people even here tonight. And tonight as they lay their head on their pillow, that they would be reminded by you of specific things that they will start to stand their ground in. That there's going to be some people in here that they stop watching certain things. They stop listening to certain things. There will be some people who stop participating in specific conversations. There will be people who stop looking at things that they've been looking at. There will be people who stop compromising their morals in so many different areas of their life as they will start feeding themselves with the things that honor you and glorify you. I thank you for the courage that's in this room today. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. You guys can be dismissed. We will